The morning my daughter-in-law told me to quit my job, she didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She stood in my kitchen, sunlight falling across the marble counter I had polished just an hour earlier, and said it the same way someone might comment on the weather. Annika, it's time for you to retire. This family needs one woman in charge. For a moment I thought I had misheard her. The kettle clicked off behind me, steam curling into the quiet. I'm sorry, I asked. Vanessa smiled, not warmly, not cruelly either, just confidently. As if the conversation had already been decided somewhere without me. You've worked long enough. Julian earns more than enough now. There's no reason for you to keep interfering. Interfering, the word sat heavy in the air. I wrapped my hands around the mug, though I hadn't poured the tea yet. My fingers trembled slightly and I hoped she wouldn't notice. I don't interfere, I said carefully. She tilted her head. You still run everything, Annika, the holidays, the finances Julian asks you about. Even this house, technically it's still yours. Technically, I had lived in that house for 34 years. I raised my son within those walls, held him through fevers, sat awake during thunderstorms when he was small, cried quietly at the kitchen table the night my husband died, technically. Vanessa stepped closer, smoothing an invisible wrinkle from her sleeve. I want a proper home, she continued. A place where I can build my life with Julian, but I can't do that while you're still at the center of everything. The kettle had long since cooled, but neither of us moved. In my job, I asked. She gave a soft shrug. It's not necessary anymore. Honestly, it looks a little sad. A woman your age still working when her son can provide. I remember staring at her then, noticing details I had somehow missed before: the immaculate manicure, the diamond studs Julian bought her last Christmas, the faint scent of expensive perfume. She looked every bit the queen she imagined herself to be. But I was not ready to surrender my crown. Until Vanessa came into our lives, things had been simple, not perfect. Life rarely is, but steady. I had worked at Caldwell and Price Accounting for 27 years. Started as a junior clerk when Julian was still in elementary school. Stayed late during tax seasons. Packed peanut butter sandwiches at midnight. Learned how to stretch every dollar after my husband Thomas passed from a sudden heart attack. Work wasn't just income, it was dignity. It was proof that I could stand on my own 2 feet. Even now, at 62, I liked the rhythm of it, the hum of printers, the smell of paper, the quiet satisfaction of balancing numbers down to the last cent. My coworkers used to joke that the building would collapse without me. I never corrected them. Julian grew into a good man, thoughtful, gentle, the kind of son who still called every Sunday. When he told me he was dating someone serious, I felt only happiness. You'll like her, Mom, he said. She's driven. It was an accurate word, though not in the way he meant. The first time I met Vanessa was at a small Italian restaurant downtown. She arrived 10 minutes late, kissed Julian lightly on the cheek, and extended her hand to me as if we were at a business meeting. Mrs. Whittaker, she said, I've heard so much about you. Her grip was firm. Evaluating throughout dinner, she asked careful questions about the house, my work, Julian's childhood, not curious questions, inventory questions. I told myself I was imagining it. Love makes us generous in our interpretations. When they announced their engagement 8 months later, I hosted a dinner, cooked Julian's favorite roast, polished the silverware Thomas and I had received as a wedding gift decades ago. Vanessa walked through the house slowly that night. This place has wonderful bones, she said. I smiled. Thomas used to say the same thing. After the wedding, Julian moved back into the house temporarily while they searched for something of their own. Temporary things have a way of rooting themselves. At first it was small adjustments. Vanessa reorganized the pantry, then the living room. She replaced my lace curtains with sleek gray panels. It brightens the space, she explained. I let it go. Homes must evolve, I told myself. And wasn't this what I wanted? A lively house again, footsteps in the hallway. But slowly, almost invisibly, the center of gravity shifted. Julian began turning to her before answering simple questions. What do you think, Vanessa? He'd say, even about Sunday dinners, especially about money. The first time it stung, I pretended it hadn't. The second time, I washed dishes longer than necessary so they wouldn't see my face. Still, I believed kindness would find its way back to me. Until the morning she asked me to quit my job. I enjoy working, I told her finally. Vanessa sighed softly, the way one does with a stubborn child. You shouldn't have to enjoy it anymore. Julian can take care of you. I've taken care of myself for a very long time. That's exactly the point, she said. Something in her tone made my stomach tighten. She wasn't suggesting, she was positioning. "And the house?" I asked quietly. She met my gaze without hesitation. "It would make more sense if Julian's name were on it, eventually, of course. These things take planning." Planning, I thought of Thomas signing those mortgage papers, of the years we skipped vacations to pay it down faster, of holding Julian's tiny hand on the front steps his first day of kindergarten. My chest felt suddenly too small for my lungs. "Does Julian know you're having this conversation?" I asked. A faint smile touched her lips. "We discuss everything." That answer told me more than she intended, because Julian had said nothing to me, not a word. In that moment, a quiet understanding settled over me, the kind that arrives without drama but changes everything. Vanessa wasn't asking me to step aside. She was already measuring the space I would leave behind. I set the mug down carefully so it wouldn't clatter. "Thank you for your concern," I said, "but I have no plans to retire." For the first time, her composure flickered, only slightly. "You should think about it," she replied. "Oh," I said gently, "I will." She nodded once as if the matter were simply postponed, then collected her handbag. As she reached the doorway, she paused. "I just want what's best for this family, Annika." So did I. But suddenly I was no longer certain we meant the same thing. When the front door closed behind her, the house felt different. Quieter, not peaceful quiet, anticipatory quiet, like the air before a storm. I stood there for a long time, staring at the faint imprint her heels had left on the rug. And for the first time since my son married her, I wondered if I was being slowly erased from my own life. That morning should have unsettled me more than it did. Instead, I went to work. Routine has always been my refuge. Numbers behave when emotions refuse to. Columns add up. Errors can be traced. Solutions exist. People are rarely so cooperative. The October air carried that faint sharpness that signals summer has finally surrendered. Leaves skittered across the parking lot as I stepped out of my car, clutching my leather satchel, the same one Julian gave me 10 birthdays ago. Inside Caldwell and Price, the fluorescent lights hummed gently overhead. Janet from reception waved. "Morning, Annika, coffee's fresh." Somehow her voice steadied me. I poured a cup and inhaled the familiar bitterness. For a moment, Vanessa's words felt far away, almost trivial, until Richard Caldwell appeared beside my desk. Richard had been my supervisor for nearly 2 decades, a practical man with thinning hair and a habit of adjusting his glasses when conversations turned serious. "Got a minute?" he asked. "Of course." He closed the door behind him, which he almost never did. A small chill crept down my spine. "We've been reviewing next year's structure," he began, "and I want you to hear this from me before rumors start floating." I folded my hands in my lap. "You're not being pushed out," he added quickly. "Quite the opposite. We'd like to transition you into a senior advisory role." I blinked. "Less daily workload, same salary, more flexibility, you've earned that." For a moment I couldn't speak. After Vanessa's insistence that my working looked sad, the timing felt almost surreal. "You're the backbone of this place," Richard continued. "Frankly, I don't trust half these kids to catch a decimal error without you." A laugh escaped me before I could stop it. Warmth spread slowly through my chest. "Thank you," I said quietly. He studied me then. "You all right, Annika?" "You seem distracted." I hesitated only a second. "My daughter-in-law thinks I should retire." Richard snorted, an undignified sound for such a careful man. "Well, your daughter-in-law doesn't run my firm." I smiled, but something deeper settled inside me at that moment. Validation, not pride exactly. More like a reminder that I still occupied space in this world beyond someone else's convenience. When I returned home that evening, the scent hit me before I even reached the kitchen. Rosemary, butter, garlic. Vanessa stood at the stove wearing one of my aprons, though she had replaced the faded floral ties with sleek black ribbon. "Perfect timing," she said without turning. "Dinner's almost ready." Julian emerged from the dining room, loosening his tie. "Smells incredible, Mom." He kissed my cheek, and for a moment everything felt normal again. We sat together, ate lemon chicken, drank a modest Pinot Vanessa had selected, then she set down her fork. "Annika and I had an interesting conversation this morning." Julian looked between us. "Oh. She's still considering her retirement," Vanessa said smoothly. I opened my mouth, closed it again, still considering. That was not what I had said. Julian smiled. "You should, Mom, you've worked harder than anyone I know." The words were loving, but they landed heavily. I was actually offered a senior advisory role today, I replied. Vanessa's fork paused midair. Julian leaned forward. That's amazing. It is, I agreed. And I accepted. Silence followed, not loud but dense. Vanessa dabbed her lips with her napkin. I just worry about your health, she said gently. Stress at your age can be dangerous. My doctor is very pleased with me. Still, she continued, wouldn't it be nice to rest, travel, let Julian take care of things? Julian nodded slowly. You deserve that, Mom. There it was again, deserve, as if independence were a burden rather than a choice. I enjoy contributing, I said. It keeps me sharp. Vanessa smiled, though her eyes did not. Later that night, I passed their bedroom on the way to mine. Their voices slipped through the partially closed door. She's being stubborn, Vanessa whispered. She's always been independent, Julian replied. That house could help us tremendously, Julian. Do you know what property values are doing in this neighborhood? My steps froze. We're not forcing her out, he said. Of course not, but if she retired, it would be logical to downsize. Somewhere comfortable, manageable. Downsize. I stood there, one hand resting against the hallway wall as something fragile inside me shifted. Not shattered, shifted, because this was no longer about my well-being. It was about strategy. I returned to my room without making a sound. Sleep did not come easily. Over the next few weeks, small things began accumulating like snow that seems harmless until the weight bends the branches. Vanessa started handling grocery deliveries. Save you the trouble, she'd say. Then she took over the utility payments. It's simpler if everything flows through one account. Which account, she did not specify. One Saturday I came home to find the study reorganized. My study, Thomas's framed photo, now sat on a lower shelf, partially obscured by a sculptural vase. I thought it modernized the space, Vanessa explained. I moved the photograph back that night after she slept. She moved it again the following afternoon. We never discussed it. Julian noticed none of these quiet rearrangements or chose not to. Love can be strangely blinding. Then came the mail. I discovered it purely by accident. A letter from the county assessor lay open on the counter, addressed to Julian regarding property evaluation. Did you request this? I asked lightly. Vanessa didn't glance up from her tablet, just exploring options. Options, the word echoed unpleasantly. That evening I called my longtime friend Eleanor. Eleanor possesses the rare gift of clarity without cruelty. After listening silently, she asked one question. Annika, whose name is on the deed? Mine, and Thomas's originally. Then don't let anyone make you feel like a guest in your own home. Her words settled around me like armor I hadn't realized I needed. Still, doubt crept in during quiet moments. Was I being selfish? Was this simply the natural turning of generations? Parents step aside. Children build, but something about Vanessa's precision unsettled me. This wasn't transition, it was acquisition. The tension finally surfaced one rainy Thursday. I arrived home early. A rare migraine had sent me retreating from the office. Voices floated from the living room. Vanessa and a man I didn't recognize stood near the front window. He held a clipboard. Excellent square footage, he was saying. And the school district alone. Vanessa noticed me first. Oh, Annika, you're home early. The man turned. Sorry, I'm Paul Simmons, residential consultant. Consultant. Not realtor, not yet. What exactly are you consulting on? I asked. Vanessa stepped forward smoothly. Just gathering information for the future. My future was not aware it required gathering. Paul shifted awkwardly. I can come back another time. Yes, I said calmly, you can. After he left, Vanessa's composure hardened. You're overreacting. You invited a property consultant into my home without telling me. It's Julian's home too. The sentence fell between us like a gauntlet. I'm not dead, I replied softly. Her jaw tightened. No one said you were. That night, Julian tried to soothe things. She's just thinking ahead, Mom. Ahead to what? He hesitated. You won't want to manage a big house forever. I manage it perfectly well now. He rubbed his temples. Why does this feel like a battle? Because I thought one of us is already at war. But I only said, it doesn't have to be. Yet deep down, I sensed the ground shifting beneath my feet, and for the first time, I began quietly preparing myself, not to surrender, but to stand. There is a particular kind of loneliness that does not come from being alone. It comes from realizing you are no longer being fully seen inside the life you built. That feeling began to follow me everywhere. In the mornings, when I found the coffee maker already programmed, not the way I liked it, but the way Vanessa preferred. In the evenings when dinner plans were discussed around me rather than with me. Even the dog Oliver had started sleeping outside Julian and Vanessa's bedroom instead of mine. Small things, always small things, but erosion is nothing more than small things repeated over time. I tried at first to meet Vanessa halfway. One Sunday, I suggested we cook together, her generation's recipes alongside mine. She agreed with polite enthusiasm, though she spent most of the afternoon correcting my measurements and explaining newer techniques she'd learned from cooking shows. "You don't have to hover," she said gently when I reached for the salt. "I've got it." Hover, another word that made me feel suddenly unnecessary. Later that week, she handed me a brochure, a retirement community. The cover displayed silver-haired couples walking along a lake, smiling at nothing in particular. "I thought you might enjoy looking at it," she said. I studied the photo. Everyone appeared content. No one appeared real. "It's beautiful," I said carefully, "for someone who wants that." She folded her arms lightly. "You could make wonderful friends there. I already have friends, and less responsibility. I'm not searching for less." Her smile faded just enough for me to see the steel beneath it. "You're making this harder than it needs to be, Annika." That was the moment I understood something important. Vanessa did not see this as a conversation. She saw it as a delay. The following Friday, Julian asked if we could talk, just the two of us. We sat on the back porch where he used to do homework as a boy. Autumn had deepened. The maple tree scattered amber leaves across the lawn. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then he exhaled slowly. "Vanessa feels like you don't trust her." Trust. Such a delicate word to place on someone else's shoulders. "I don't know her well enough yet to distrust her," I replied. He frowned. "She's trying to build a life with me, and I want that for you, but," he asked quietly. I looked at my son, really looked. There were new lines near his eyes. Responsibilities had begun to carve their subtle signatures into his face. "When you were little," I said, "you used to run into the ocean without checking how deep the water was. Do you remember?" A faint smile touched his lips. "You'd chase after me every time. Not to stop you from swimming, only to make sure you didn't disappear beneath something stronger than you expected." He stared at the yard. "You think Vanessa is stronger than I see." "I think she knows exactly what she wants. And that's bad." "No," I said gently, "unless what she wants requires someone else to vanish." His shoulders stiffened. "She feels you're holding on too tightly." The sentence pierced more deeply than he likely intended. "I have loosened many things in my life, Julian," I said softly, "but I will not loosen my dignity." He fell silent again, then almost reluctantly he asked, "Would you ever consider selling, years from now, I mean?" There it was, not Vanessa's voice, his. I took a long breath before answering. "When I am ready to leave this house," I said, "it will be because I have chosen the next chapter, not because someone has written it for me." He nodded, though uncertainty lingered in his eyes. For the first time, I wondered how many conversations had happened without me. The discovery came 2 weeks later, entirely by accident. I had been searching for our old insurance file. Thomas was meticulous about paperwork, and I kept everything labeled in the study cabinet. Inside the drawer, I noticed a folder I didn't recognize. Cream-colored, new, my name was typed neatly across the tab. Curiosity nudged me. Inside lay several documents: property estimates, market comparisons, projected sale timelines, and a draft letter addressed to me, not signed, but clearly written by Vanessa. It outlined the emotional and financial benefits of transitioning Annika Whittaker into a smaller, more manageable residence. Transitioning, as if I were a department being phased out. My hands remained steady. Decades of accounting had trained them well, but something inside my chest tightened. At the bottom of the folder sat a business card. Paul Simmons, Senior Property Strategist. Strategist. So this was not casual curiosity. This was planning. I replaced the folder exactly as I had found it. Then I closed the drawer and sat down slowly in Thomas's old chair. For a long time, I simply listened to the house, the refrigerator humming, a clock ticking somewhere down the hall, my own breathing. Strangely, I did not feel rage. I felt clarity. That evening, I called Alina again. "She's mapping your exit," Alina said bluntly after I explained. "I know." "So what are you going to do?" I stared out the window at the fading light. "For now, I'm going to watch." And so I did. I began noticing patterns. Vanessa asking casual questions about my savings. Julian mentioning investment opportunities that required liquidity. Even their sudden interest in renovations that would dramatically increase resale value. One night at dinner, Vanessa placed her hand lightly over Julian's. "There's a stunning property near the river," she said. "Open floor plan, perfect for entertaining." Julian glanced at me before responding. "Sounds nice." "It is," she continued, "but timing matters in real estate. Timing, always timing." I set down my fork. "Are you planning to move?" "Eventually," she replied. "When the right resources align." Resources, it was almost impressive the way she cloaked ambition in polite vocabulary. Later, as I washed dishes, Julian approached. "You've been quiet. Just tired." He hesitated. "You know we'd never abandon you, right?" Abandon, such an interesting choice of word. "I would hope not," I said, "but hope and certainty are distant cousins." A few days later, something unexpected happened at work. Richard called me in again. "We're restructuring ownership shares," he said, "and I want you included." I stared at him. "Ownership? You've given nearly 3 decades here. It's time your future reflected that." When I left his office, the autumn air felt sharper, brighter. For the first time since Vanessa's campaign began, I sensed the quiet forming of another path, one she had not anticipated. That night, I opened a new checking account, transferred funds Vanessa didn't know existed. Scheduled a meeting with an estate attorney, not out of fear, out of wisdom, because if someone is carefully arranging your ending, you must be equally careful in writing your continuation. Still, what unsettled me most was not Vanessa's strategy. It was Julian's gradual drift toward it. Love can persuade good people into uncomfortable silences. And silence, I was learning, can be the loudest warning of all. One evening, as I passed their bedroom again, I heard Vanessa say something that stopped me cold. "If she won't step down gracefully," she murmured, "we may have to encourage the decision." Encourage. I stood there in the dim hallway, heart steady but alert. For the first time, I realized this was no longer about persuasion. It was about pressure. And I had the distinct feeling that the storm I sensed weeks ago was finally beginning to break. Pressure does not always arrive as confrontation. More often, it arrives disguised as concern. The shift began so subtly that, had I been less attentive, I might have mistaken it for coincidence. Vanessa started commenting on my memory. At first, it was harmless. "Annika, didn't you already take your vitamins this morning?" Or, "You left the porch light on all night, that's not like you." I brushed it aside. Everyone forgets small things. But then Julian began repeating the same observations. "Mom, are you sleeping all right? You seem distracted lately." One evening, Vanessa placed a hand gently on my arm. "Have you had a cognitive screening recently? It's very responsible at our age to stay ahead of these things." Our age. She was 34. I smiled politely. "My doctor is quite satisfied with my mind." Her lips curved. "Of course, prevention is simply wise." That word again, wise, as if resistance were foolish. The real turning point came on a gray Tuesday morning. I walked into the kitchen and found the stove already on, a pan warming slowly. Vanessa stood beside it, arms folded. "I think you forgot you started cooking," she said. "I didn't start cooking." She tilted her head toward the flame. "You must have." Something inside me sharpened instantly. I always check the stove. Always. Years of habit. Years of caution after Thomas once nearly set a dish towel too close to a burner. "I did not turn that on," I said calmly. Vanessa gave a soft, sympathetic look, the kind reserved for someone who doesn't realize their own decline. "It happens." Julian entered just then. "What's going on?" Vanessa lowered her voice slightly. The stove was left on. He looked at me with concern. "Mom." I met his gaze steadily. I did not leave it on. There was a pause, not long, but long enough for doubt to stretch between us. Julian crossed the kitchen and switched off the flame. "Let's just be more careful, okay?" Careful, as though I were the risk. As they left the room, a quiet certainty settled into my bones. Someone had turned that burner on, and it had not been me. After that morning, I began keeping notes, not obsessively, methodically, dates, comments, small irregularities. It is difficult to manipulate a woman who has spent 30 years documenting details for a living. A week later, I returned from work to find 3 unfamiliar pill bottles on the counter. "What are these?" I asked. Vanessa glanced up from her laptop. "Just supplements, memory support. Focus enhancers, completely natural." "I didn't ask for them." "You don't have to ask for care," she replied smoothly. "I do when it involves what I put into my body." Julian stepped in then. "She's just trying to help, Mom. Help." The most dangerous word when placed in the wrong hands. I appreciate the sentiment, I said evenly, but I will manage my own health. Vanessa exhaled softly. You're very defensive lately. No, I answered, I'm very aware. Her eyes flickered just briefly, but I saw it. Calculation adjusting. 2 days later, the phone rang at work. It was Mrs. Keller, my neighbor of 20 years. Annika, she said gently, I hope you don't mind me mentioning this, but a woman stopped by yesterday asking about you. My stomach tightened. What kind of questions? Oh, harmless things, whether you seemed forgetful, if I'd noticed you wandering, that sort of thing. Wandering. The word chilled me. Did she give her name? A pause. She said she was family. When I hung up, my hands were perfectly steady, but the world felt different, clearer. This was no longer subtle suggestion, it was narrative construction. That evening, I did something I had never done before. I installed a small camera facing the kitchen, another near the study, not out of paranoia, out of prudence. Trust is precious, but evidence is protection. The proof arrived sooner than I expected. On Thursday night, I sat at my desk reviewing footage. At 6:12 a.m., Vanessa entered the kitchen. She glanced toward the hallway, then she turned on the stove, placed an empty pan, and walked away. I watched the clip 3 times, not because I doubted what I saw, but because acceptance requires repetition. There it was, not confusion, not accident, design. For several minutes I simply sat there, breathing slowly. I did not cry, I did not rage. Instead, an unfamiliar calm settled over me, the calm that comes when uncertainty finally dissolves into truth. Now I understood. If she could paint me as forgetful, fragile, unsafe, then encouraging me to transition would appear compassionate rather than opportunistic. It was clever, cold but clever. I closed the laptop gently and began planning. The next morning, I scheduled an appointment with my physician. Full cognitive evaluation, neurological screening, the works. When the results returned a week later, my doctor smiled warmly. Annika, your mind is sharper than most people 20 years younger. I requested multiple certified copies. Then I met with my estate attorney, Mr. Halbrook, a quiet man whose discretion had guided many complicated family matters. After reviewing everything, he leaned back thoughtfully. You are under no obligation to relinquish control of your assets, he said, but I would recommend strengthening your legal protections immediately. We updated my will. Established an irrevocable trust. Assigned medical power of attorney not to Julian, but to Alina, not as punishment, as precaution, because love does not negate influence. And influence was gathering around my son like fog. Meanwhile, Vanessa's efforts intensified. She began insisting on attending my medical appointments. I declined. She suggested hiring a little household help. I declined again. Then one evening at dinner, she set down her fork and spoke with rehearsed gentleness. Julian and I think it might be time to consider a professional evaluation. I dabbed my napkin calmly. I already had one. Julian blinked. You did. Excellent results. Vanessa's composure slipped only for a heartbeat. Why didn't you tell us? Because no one asked, you assumed. Silence stretched across the table, for the first time in months. I watched uncertainty enter her eyes, but storms rarely end at their first thunder. They gather, they darken, and then eventually they break where everyone can see them. 3 nights later, as I passed the living room, I heard Vanessa speaking in a low, urgent voice. If we wait too long, Julian, it becomes harder legally. Legally, he sounded uneasy. She's my mother, and I respect that, but you have to think about our future. A pause, then, sometimes love means making difficult decisions for someone who can't make them anymore. I did not move, did not breathe, because in that moment, I understood exactly how far she was willing to go, and I realized something else too. Vanessa believed I was alone. She believed I was passive. She believed time favored her. She was wrong. For the first time since this quiet war began, I was ready to step into the light. Not with anger, not with cruelty, but with truth. And truth, when revealed at the right moment, has a way of rearranging every crown in the room. There is a moment when you realize someone has mistaken your kindness for weakness, that something inside you settles, not hardens, settles, like a foundation. Remembering it was poured to hold weight. For weeks I had watched quietly while Vanessa arranged her version of my future. But once I saw the stove footage, once I heard the word legally whispered in my own living room, stillness was no longer the appropriate response. Preparation was. I did not confront her immediately. Truth is most powerful when it arrives without warning. Instead, I continued exactly as before. I went to work, watered the hydrangeas, hosted my monthly book club, even laughed when Vanessa described a charity luncheon she hoped to chair, something elegant, something that reflects leadership, she said. Leadership. The irony almost made me smile. Meanwhile, my attorney finalized the trust. The house, every inch of it, now rested securely within it. It could not be sold, leveraged, or transferred without my explicit consent and a secondary authorization from a liener. I also authorized a clause I never imagined needing. Any attempt to challenge my competency would require evaluation from 3 independent specialists chosen by the trust. Mr. Halbrook had nodded approvingly. You are not being dramatic, Annika, you are being wise. Wisdom often looks excessive to those who benefit from your unpreparedness. The opportunity to shift the balance came unexpectedly. Julian announced one Sunday that he wanted to host a small dinner. Just close friends, he said, and a few colleagues. Vanessa's been working hard, it would mean a lot to her. Vanessa smiled modestly. I thought it might be nice to celebrate new beginnings. New beginnings, the phrase lingered in the air like perfume. Of course, I said, our home has always been open. She hesitated just slightly at the word our. The week leading up to the dinner, she transformed the house with almost ceremonial precision. White orchids appeared on the entry table. My softer lamps were replaced with brighter ones. Even the music she tested had a stately quality. It was not merely a dinner, it was a stage. On the afternoon of the gathering, I noticed a folder placed deliberately on the study desk. Not hidden, displayed. Inside were architectural renderings, modern, expansive, unmistakably expensive. Across the top, Riverside Estates pending acquisition. Pending. The audacity of the word took my breath for a moment. That evening, guests filled the house with polite laughter and the clink of crystal. Julian moved easily among them, proud and relaxed. Vanessa glowed. She introduced me repeatedly as Julian's mother, Annika. She still lives with us. Still, such a small word, such a careful erasure. I corrected no one, not yet. Halfway through the evening, as dessert plates were cleared, Vanessa tapped her glass lightly. The room softened into attention. I want to thank you all for being part of this exciting chapter, she began. Julian and I are preparing for a beautiful transition, one that allows our family to grow into the future. My heartbeat slowed, not quickened, slowed, because here it was, the moment she believed belonged entirely to her. She gestured toward the study. We've been planning a move to Riverside Estates. A home designed for entertaining, for children someday, for a life that reflects where we're headed. A murmur of congratulations rippled through the guests. Julian looked surprised. Apparently, he had not expected the announcement tonight. Then Vanessa added, her voice turning soft with rehearsed emotion. Of course, transitions can be delicate. Annika has done so much for this family, and we want her next step to be comfortable, supported, dignified. Dignified, the word hovered like a veil. Several guests turned toward me with sympathetic smiles, the kind reserved for someone gently being ushered aside. Vanessa reached into the folder and lifted a brochure. A retirement community, the same one she had handed me weeks earlier. We've found a wonderful place, she continued. Lakeside Gardens. Independent living, medical support, vibrant social life, everything she deserves. Deserves. I rose slowly from my chair, not abruptly, not dramatically, just enough for the room to quiet. May I say something? I asked. Vanessa's smile held, though tension flickered at its corners. Of course, Annika. I folded my hands lightly. I was not aware I was moving. A ripple passed through the guests. Vanessa gave a small laugh. Oh, we've discussed it. No, I said gently, you've discussed it. Julian shifted beside her. Mom. I met his eyes, not with accusation, but with steadiness. Then I reached into the drawer behind me and placed several documents on the table. Certified medical evaluations, trust papers, property records. I thought tonight might be an appropriate time for clarity, I said. The room fell utterly silent. My physicians confirm that I am in excellent cognitive health. Furthermore, this house is secured within a trust that prevents its sale or transfer without my consent. Vanessa's color drained almost imperceptibly. I don't understand why this is necessary, she said. Because, I replied calmly, someone has been creating a narrative that I am no longer capable of directing my own life. Julian looked between us, confusion deepening. Vanessa, she recovered quickly. No one is creating a narrative, we're trying to protect Annika. I nodded once. Then perhaps you can explain why my neighbor was questioned about my supposed forgetfulness. Her lips parted, no sound emerged, and why a property strategist was invited into my home. Still silence. I opened my laptop, turned the screen toward them, pressed play. The footage was brief, clear. Vanessa entering the kitchen, lighting the stove, walking away. A collective breath swept through the room. Julian stared, uncomprehending. Vanessa? She shook her head quickly. This is ridiculous. It proves nothing. It proves intent, I said softly. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked unsure. Not defeated, but exposed. And exposure has a way of rearranging power faster than any argument ever could. Silence reveals people more honestly than noise ever can. After the video ended, no one moved. The soft jazz playing in the background suddenly felt inappropriate, like laughter at the wrong moment. Julian stared at the screen, then at Vanessa, then back at me. I watched something fragile shift behind his eyes, not just shock, recognition. Tell me that isn't what it looks like, he said quietly. Vanessa let out a short breath that trembled at the edges. You're seriously believing this? She asked, her voice sharpening. A single clip without context? I did not respond. Truth does not require decoration. Julian stepped closer to the laptop. Why would you turn the stove on and walk away? She crossed her arms, a posture I had come to recognize as both shield and weapon. I was checking the ignition earlier. Maybe I forgot to turn it off. You looked straight into the hallway before doing it, I said gently. Her gaze snapped toward me. So now I'm being surveilled in my own home? Another interesting choice. A murmur moved through the guests, discomfort, curiosity, the quiet recalibration that happens when a room realizes it has wandered into something deeply private. I almost felt sorry for her then. Almost. But manipulation thrives in privacy, and she had chosen the audience. Julian ran a hand through his hair. Why didn't you just tell me about this? He asked her. Because it's absurd, she insisted. Your mother has been distant for weeks, paranoid even. Cameras, legal documents, what does that say about trust? Trust. She wielded the words skillfully. I folded my hands. Trust weakens when one is encouraged to doubt their own mind. Vanessa's composure cracked just slightly. You're twisting this. No, I said, I'm illuminating it. The room felt smaller now, though no one had moved. Then Julian asked the question that changed everything. Did you talk to Mrs. Keller about my mom's memory? Vanessa hesitated, a tiny pause, but hesitation speaks loudly when truth should be effortless. I was concerned, she said finally. Is that a crime? To care about the woman who lives with us? Again, lives with us. Julian flinched. I saw it clearly this time. You told people she might be wandering, he said. I asked if she seemed forgetful. Those are not the same thing. Her voice rose. I was trying to plan responsibly. Do you know what happens when families ignore decline? When accidents happen, lawsuits, Julian, tragedies, someone has to think ahead. There it was, not fear, control. Julian looked suddenly tired, older than his 40 years. Why didn't you come to me first? Because you avoid difficult conversations with her, she replied swiftly. He opened his mouth, closed it again. Pain crossed his face, not only at her words, but at the possibility they held some truth. I stepped forward then, not to escalate, but to steady the room. Julian, I said softly, I never expected you to shield me from time, only from being quietly pushed ahead of it. He met my gaze, and for the first time that evening, he truly saw me. Not as his mother who would always endure, but as a woman standing her ground. One of Julian's colleagues cleared his throat awkwardly. We should probably... Yes, I said kindly. Thank you all for coming. I believe the evening has asked more of you than any dinner should. Guests began gathering their things, offering restrained goodbyes. No one lingered. People rarely do when a family rearranges itself in front of them. Soon, the house emptied. Only the three of us remained. The quiet that followed felt entirely different from the one before the storm. This quiet was aftermath. Julian spoke first. Vanessa, did you plan to move Mom out without telling her? Her eyes glistened suddenly. I was trying to create a future for us. Is that so terrible? Not if it's honest. It was honest, pending acquisition. He asked, gesturing toward the folder. She faltered. I didn't want to pressure you until everything aligned. Pressure, such a revealing word. He sank into a chair. All these weeks you made it sound like she was the one resisting what was inevitable. Vanessa's voice softened, shifting tactics. Julian, listen to me. You deserve your own home, your own space. Children someday. We can't build that while orbiting your mother's routines. Orbiting, as if I were a planet exerting gravitational inconvenience. I watched my son wrestle silently with two loyalties, the woman he chose and the woman who raised him. There is no easy geometry to that. I never asked you to orbit me, I said quietly. They both turned. I asked only not to be erased. Vanessa's restraint snapped. No one is erasing you, but families evolve, parents step aside, that's natural. Stepping aside is a choice, I replied. Being maneuvered is not. Her breath came faster now. You're turning him against me. No, Julian said suddenly, you did that yourself. The words hung between them, heavy, irreversible. She stared at him as though struck. I did everything for us, she whispered. By undermining my mother, by protecting our future, at the cost of her dignity. Tears spilled then, real ones, I believe. Vanessa was not heartless. Ambitious, yes, afraid, perhaps, but not empty. You don't understand what it's like, she said. Growing up watching your parents lose everything because they didn't plan. I swore I would never live that way, never feel that powerless again. The confession softened something in me. Motivation does not excuse harm, but it explains its shape. Julian's shoulders lowered slightly. You could have told me that, he said. I tried, she whispered. You always said things would work themselves out. He looked toward me, guilt flickered across his face. Perhaps he remembered every time he chose comfort over clarity. I stepped closer, my voice steady. Vanessa, security built on deception is not security, it is quicksand. She wiped her cheeks. I thought if you retired, downsized, everyone would be happier. Everyone? I asked gently. Or just you, she said nothing. Minutes passed. Finally, Julian stood. I think you should stay with your sister for a few days. The words were careful, but final. Her head jerked upward. You're sending me away. I'm asking for space. We both need to think. She looked from him to me, searching, calculating, perhaps hoping I would intervene. I did not. Some reckonings belong only to the people who created them. Without another word, she turned and walked upstairs. A suitcase rolled across the floor half an hour later. The front door closed softly behind her, and just like that, the house exhaled. Julian remained by the window long after her car disappeared. I should have seen it, he said hoarsely. You loved her, I replied. Love should not make you blind. No, I said. But it often makes us hopeful. He turned toward me then, eyes bright with unshed tears. I'm so sorry, Mom. I placed my hand over his. I did not need you to fight my battles, Julian, only to remember that I am still strong enough to stand. He nodded, swallowing hard. That night, as I prepared for bed, I realized something quietly profound. Vanessa had wanted a queen. What she had forgotten was that queens are not crowned by houses. They are crowned by the simple refusal to surrender themselves. And I had no intention of surrendering. Still, storms rarely end with the first clearing of clouds. The hardest part was yet to come because exposure is only the beginning. Consequences are what reshape a family forever. The morning after Vanessa left, the house felt unfamiliar, not empty, just paused. As though the walls themselves were listening for what would happen next. Julian did not go to work. Instead, he sat at the kitchen table long after his coffee had gone cold, turning the mug slowly between his palms. I did not rush him. Some realizations require silence to fully arrive. When I finally joined him, he looked up with the expression he used to wear as a boy after breaking something he loved, equal parts regret and disbelief. How long have you known? He asked quietly. Long enough, I said. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I considered the question carefully before answering, because I needed to be certain. Accusations without proof destroy trust faster than deception does. He nodded slowly. I keep replaying everything, the comments, the doctor suggestions, the property visits. I told myself she was just being practical. Practicality is not the same as kindness, I said gently. He shut his eyes for a moment. I feel like I failed you. The words settled heavily between us. You did not fail me, I replied. You hesitated. There is a difference. He let out a shaky breath. I should have protected you. I reached across the table and covered his hand with mine. Julian, I did not raise you to protect me from life, only to walk beside me with honesty. For the first time since the dinner, his shoulders loosened. But the pain did not vanish. Betrayal rarely leaves clean edges. Vanessa called that afternoon. I could hear her voice faintly through the phone, tight, controlled. Julian listened without interrupting. When he finally spoke, his tone was calm but unfamiliar. No, I'm not discussing this over the phone because it deserves more than that. Yes, I saw it with my own eyes. A long pause followed. Then, this isn't about the house, it's about trust. He ended the call and stared at the counter for a long time. She says you set her up, he told me quietly. I almost smiled. When truth appears suddenly, it often feels like a trap to the person who created the lie. He rubbed his forehead. She wants to come back tonight, says we should present a united front that the dinner got out of hand. Do you want her to? I asked. He did not answer immediately. I don't know who she is right now, he admitted. That, I thought, is the hardest part, realizing the person you share a bed with may not be the one you believed you married. 2 days later, they met at a small cafe downtown. He asked if I minded. I would prefer you speak freely, I said. Marriage deserves that chance. When he returned that evening, twilight clung softly to his shoulders. He looked older, not physically. Internally, we sat in the living room, the same place where he once built blanket forts during thunderstorms. She apologized, he said. I waited. But every apology had a condition attached. She said she only pushed because I wasn't decisive enough, that someone had to steer our future. And what did you say? That partnership is not steering, it's walking together. A faint warmth stirred in my chest. He had learned that somewhere, perhaps from Thomas, perhaps from watching me stand these past weeks. She also asked something else, he continued. What, if you would consider transferring the house into both our names as a gesture of goodwill? The audacity no longer shocked me. It simply clarified. And how did you respond? I told her the house is yours, end of discussion. Emotion flickered across his face, grief mingled with clarity. She didn't like that. No, I said softly. People rarely like closed doors when they expected them open. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling. I keep wondering if I missed signs before we married, or if ambition just grew louder once she felt secure. Ambition is not a flaw, I replied, but ambition without empathy becomes hunger. He absorbed that quietly. After a moment, he asked, do you hate her? The question surprised me. No, I said truthfully. He studied me, perhaps expecting more. Hate is heavy, Julian. I have no interest in carrying it. But after everything, I see a woman who was afraid of instability, who mistook control for safety. That does not make her evil, it makes her human. He swallowed. You're kinder than I deserve. No, I said gently. I am simply unwilling to let someone else's fear reshape my heart. A week passed before Vanessa returned to collect more of her belongings. She arrived mid-morning, her posture immaculate as ever, though the shadows beneath her eyes betrayed restless nights. For a moment, we simply regarded one another in the doorway. Then she spoke. I never wanted it to unfold like this. Few people do, I replied. She stepped inside slowly, as though unsure whether the house would accept her. I underestimated you, she said after a pause. There was no malice in her voice now, only tired honesty. I believe you underestimated what this home represents, I answered. Her gaze drifted toward the staircase. My parents lost their house when I was 16. One day it was ours, the next it belonged to the bank. I remember packing my room into boxes while strangers measured the walls. Something softened inside me. Pain often plants the seeds of control. I told myself I would never be that vulnerable again, she continued. And so you tried to eliminate every uncertainty, I said quietly. She nodded. Yes. We stood there, two women shaped by different storms. After a moment she whispered, I did care about you, in my way. I never doubted that, I replied. Then why does it feel like there's no path back? Because care without respect cannot survive. Tears gathered, though she blinked them away quickly. I don't know if Julian will forgive me. Forgiveness, I said, is less about deserving and more about what a heart is willing to rebuild. She absorbed that silently. Before heading upstairs, she paused. You didn't humiliate me that night, she said. You could have. Instead, you simply told the truth. Truth is sufficient, I answered. When she left, the house felt quieter again, but not tense this time. Resolved. That evening, Julian sat beside me on the porch as the sun dissolved into amber. I think our marriage may not survive this, he said. Grief threaded through his voice, but beneath it lay something steadier. Self-respect. Some relationships, I said gently, teach us what love is, others teach us what it is not. He looked toward the darkening yard. I wanted forever. Forever requires two people protecting the same garden. After a long silence, he whispered, What happens now? I watched the first porch light flicker on across the street. Now, I said, we live honestly. Whatever grows from that will be strong enough to remain. He nodded slowly. And as the night settled around us, I realized the storm had done more than expose Vanessa. It had awakened something in my son. Clarity, and sometimes clarity, though painful, is the greatest inheritance a parent can witness. Yet one final chapter remained. Because healing is not just the absence of conflict. It is the quiet rebuilding that follows. Winter arrived gently that year, not with the violent winds our town sometimes suffered, but with slow, deliberate mornings where frost traced lace-like patterns across the windows. For the first time in months, the house felt entirely like mine again, not because Vanessa was gone, but because the tension that had lived quietly inside the walls had finally dissolved. There is a profound difference between an empty house and a peaceful one. This was peace. Julian moved through the weeks carefully, like a man learning the weight of his own footsteps again. He and Vanessa tried counseling for a short time. I encouraged it not out of obligation, but because endings deserve the dignity of effort. But some fractures reveal truths that cannot be unseen. One evening he sat across from me, hands folded, wedding ring turning slowly around his finger. "We want different lives," he said quietly, not angrily, not dramatically, just truthfully. "She says security means controlling every variable. I'm realizing security might actually mean trusting the people beside you." I nodded. "That is a difficult lesson, but a valuable one." He gave a faint smile. "You seem strangely calm about all this." I considered that. "When your father died," I said softly, "I learned something important. Life will rearrange itself whether we approve or not. Fighting every change only exhausts the heart. Choosing which changes define you, that is where strength lives." A week later, they separated. There was no scandal, no shouting. Just two people acknowledging that the future they imagined together required versions of themselves that no longer existed. On the afternoon Vanessa came to collect the last of her things, snow fell in delicate spirals. She stood in the foyer holding her gloves, looking smaller somehow, not diminished, simply human. "I signed the apartment lease this morning," she said. "I hope it brings you comfort," I replied. She hesitated. "Julian told me about the trust, about how carefully you protected everything." "Yes. I used to think preparation was about controlling outcomes," she admitted quietly. "Now I think it might simply be about respecting what matters. Growth often arrives disguised as regret." "I believe you will build a beautiful life," I told her. She looked surprised. "After everything." "Pain is a remarkable teacher if we let it be." Her eyes glistened. "I am sorry, Annika, not just for the house, but for trying to make you feel small inside your own story." The apology was not perfect, but it was sincere, and sincerity is enough. "I accept your apology," I said gently. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then, in a gesture that felt both natural and unexpected, she stepped forward and embraced me. Brief, trembling, real. When the door closed behind her, I did not feel triumph, only completion. Spring crept in slowly after that. The hydrangeas returned first, stubborn as ever. Julian began laughing again, not constantly, but freely. He spent more evenings at home, sometimes cooking with me the way he used to before adulthood convinced him he was too busy. One night, as we chopped vegetables side by side, he said something that settled deep in my heart. "I used to think strength meant building a life separate from you. Now I understand it also means honoring the life that built me." I touched his arm lightly. "Separation is natural, Julian, erasure is not." He smiled. "I won't confuse the two again." Work flourished as well. My advisory role brought a gentle rhythm, fewer long hours, more mentorship. Watching younger colleagues grow reminded me that usefulness does not expire with age. One afternoon, Richard joked, "We'll probably have to carry you out of here at 90. I laughed, "Make it 95. But the most surprising change came quietly. One Sunday morning, Julian joined me on the porch with 2 cups of tea. "I've been thinking," he said. "About the future?" I raised an eyebrow, always a dangerous pastime. He grinned faintly. "I don't want you to ever feel like you have to guard your place again, so I met with an architect." I blinked. "An architect for a small guest house," he explained. "At the back of the property, not for now, just someday. A space designed exactly how you'd want it if you ever chose more privacy." "Chose," the word warmed me more than the tea. "You're planning for a future that respects my voice," I said. "Yes." Emotion pressed gently behind my ribs. "Your father would be very proud of the man you've become." He looked down, swallowing. "I learned from both of you. As months passed, the story that once felt like a storm gradually became something else. A lesson, not about winning. Not about losing, but about standing. Because here is what I have come to understand: a home is not claimed by the loudest voice, nor by the youngest, nor even by the one with the grandest plans. A home belongs to the person who protects its spirit. And dignity, once surrendered, is painfully difficult to reclaim. One evening near the start of summer, I hosted dinner again. Nothing elaborate, just roasted vegetables, fresh bread, laughter drifting easily through open windows. At one point, Julian looked around the table and said quietly, "It feels right again." Yes, it did, not because everything was unchanged, but because everything was honest. Now, when I sit on the porch at dusk, I sometimes think about how close I came to doubting myself, how easily a confident narrative can make even a strong woman question her footing. If you remember nothing else from my story, remember this: growing older does not mean growing invisible. Love does not require surrendering your voice, and kindness should never be mistaken for permission. We can welcome new chapters without allowing anyone to tear out the pages that came before. Vanessa once told me this family needed one woman in charge. She was wrong. Families are not kingdoms, they are gardens, and gardens thrive not under rulers but under careful hands. Before I end, let me ask you something heart to heart. If someone you loved began quietly rewriting your place in your own life, would you have noticed? And more importantly, would you have had the courage to stand the way I finally did? Tell me in the comments. I read more than you might imagine. And if this story reminded you of your own strength, or perhaps someone else who needs theirs, don't forget to subscribe and support the channel. Stories like these matter because they remind us that dignity has no expiration date. Until next time, take care of your home.